What's going on, everyone? So in this video I wanted to show you how I approach the Sorcerer from the Court of the Seven Headed Serpent. I'm starting this project with a Zenithal highlight, and to make things a little quicker I'm going to use Army Painter speed paints. In this case I'm going with the Grim Black and adding the speed paint medium at a 1:1 ratio. I decided to thin down the speed paint because the villainy inks that I'm going to be using later on tend to darken the mini, so I wanted to make sure that all the highlights were still present even after I apply the Goon's Grime villainy inks. Remember to let your speed paint fully dry before you apply any other colors on top of it so you avoid reactivating the paint. Up next is the skin of the Sorcerer, and for that I went with Pro Acryl's Dark Flesh and Tan Flesh. I was having the same thought process here, go with a brighter skin tone that I want because the Goon's Grime will be bringing it back down. Apologies for the out of focus shot. Still very new to YouTube, so I'm still working out the kinks of getting everything in focus. One thing that I really love about going for a grimdark look is that precision is not needed. So here I'm just going to be blocking off sections that I think should be darker. I'm not paying much attention to where the highlights are or any of that stuff. If it's like under the Zenithal, I'm just slapping on that dark flesh, and then everything else will be tan flesh. The Tan Flesh was a pretty transparent paint, so I did apply 2 to 3 coats on all of the unpainted skin. I also went over a lot of the Dark Flesh just to blend those in a little bit better. As I was applying the lighter skin tone, I tried to keep in mind the darkening phase that I mentioned earlier. So I kept pushing the highlights brighter and brighter. If any of the dark flesh looked too dark, I would just apply more tan flesh over it just to get it to a point where I won't lose any of those details once I do darken the whole mini down. For the weapons, I just went with the Pro Acryl Dark Silver. Nothing really special here. For the intestines, I again went with speed paints. This time I went with the Purple Alchemy. I really wanted to thin this one down as well because I didn't want it to be too purple. I wanted somewhat of a pinkish tone to it on the highlights, and then the inside kind of crevices would be a darker purple. To bring back the highlights and the intestines, I mixed in a little bit of the Tan Flesh with the Alchemy Purple. I always like to keep a sheet of paper nearby just in case I need to like test the paint out, see how it's coming out if I'm doing like any kind of mixing. This paper is made for like watercolors, acrylic paints, or just doing like pencil drawings. Once I'm happy with what I see on the paper, I start applying to the mini. For the skulls, I just went with Vallejo's Off-White. For the Off-White, I did I think 2, maybe 3 layers. The first layer was really focusing on all the highlights, so really guided by the Zenithal highlight. And for the second coat, I went for the highlights again, and then I push it a little more into the dark areas. To add a little bit of detail to the horns, I did edge highlighting using that Off-White. While I was painting the base, I noticed that there was this weird threading on the rocks and like the skulls. I have no idea how I got there, but I kind of liked it, so I just kept it there. So we're finally getting to where the magic really happens. Here I'm mixing a 50-50 mix of Villainy Ink's Goon's Grime with enamel thinner. Once the Villainy ink is thinned down, I just slather the entire mini in it. The only thing that I didn't cover are the flames. I put this on the base, the skulls, the steps, absolutely everything. This is actually the only color that like the surrounding base is gonna have, and it does give it this like dark grimy look, and it's pretty awesome. While I was giving the Goons Grime a little bit of time to dry, I ended up smacking the mini and breaking off the sword. I considered cutting off the bottom, but you know, just give it the metal hands look, but yeah, I decided to just glue it back on. So up next is the removal phase. Here I just take a cotton swab, get a little bit of the enamel thinner, and start dabbing on like raised edges, anything that I want to be a little brighter, a little more highlighted. To add some blood effects, I'm going with Carrion Crimson. For this paint, I just threw it onto the hands and any open wounds. I did have to do this in 2 coats. The first coat came out a little thin. I wanted a little more deeper red for this. If you're ever going to add another layer of any of these enamel paints, remember to let that first layer fully dry so that you don't just get like globs of it, because it's just going to start running into places that you don't want it to go. Here, if you let it dry, you can have a lot more control of where you have it. So up next is the flames on the sword and the head. For this, I was going to start with a yellow base, so I wanted to make sure that it was a very bright undercoat. So here I'm applying a Stynylrez white all over the flames, a little bit on the like adjacent parts, just so I can get that OSL from the flames. To get that first yellow coat, I went with Vallejo's Sun Yellow. This is my first time trying Vallejo's Sun Yellow, and honestly I really loved it. It was a very like saturated yellow. I didn't feel like I had to do multiple coats of it, so I think going forward Sun Yellow is going to be my go-to. Up next, I'm going with the red, and this time it's going to be Bloody Red. This was my first time using this one as well, and it was a lot more saturated than I expected. It was very highly pigmented, so it came out a little harsh. So what I decided to do was do a 50-50 of the Sun Yellow and the Bloody Red to get more of an orangey tone, and I started applying that like throughout all the flames. Anytime I felt like I went too far with the orange, I would just get a little dab of pure yellow and start like blending it in. The paint was still wet on those spots, so it was easy to just kind of like get a little drop on the tip of the brush and then just start blending it in and getting a little more natural transition from like the yellow to the orange that I created. In the end, I did end up using that pure Bloody Red, but I really thinned it down. I want to make sure that it didn't create any like harsh transitions, have it just be like a smoother blend. It was more of a glaze that I was applying at this point. And that's everything. I honestly can't speak highly enough of the Villainy Inks line of paints. The stuff is liquid talent. Like, I've never been able to paint Grimdark, and this is like the 3rd mini that I painted using those, and I feel like I got the exact results that I wanted. I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe.